Hi, this is Misha, and welcome to my presentation on form input validation. What, how, and why. What's being validated? Well, first, you need information from your site's user for some reason. As an example, maybe you want them to sign up for your newsletter, but you would need to know who they are and where to send the newsletter, so you make a place for them to give you that information. You make a form. But what if the person on the other end of the keyboard is just messing with you and not really interested in your newsletter? Or maybe they're not even a person. They might put in strange information, and that would waste your time and energy to delete it. And it could waste your money because a lot of mailing lists will charge you if they have to try and resend something that is trying to be sent to someplace that doesn't even really exist. So the answer is to validate the information they send you, to make sure that they've given you all the information you need, and also that the information is the right sort of data. So you need to check both the existence and the type of data before it can actually be accepted. Now, there are two methods of validation, and they both each have things they're good at and things they're not so good at. Server-side validation is not very hard to do. It's just a little bit of JavaScript in a nice little function. You send the contents of the form to your server and you have JavaScript check it out. So, for example, if my HTML form looks like this, you have your form name, which is my form here, and on submit, which means when the submit button is clicked, then they're going to validate the form. And then down here is the name. You've got a label, name, and then you have a text box, a little text box that is named F name. So I imagine that's for first name, and this form will eventually grow bigger. And then you have the button, the submit button, with the value of submit. And that's the end of the form. So the JavaScript to make the validation work could look like this. It's a function named validate form, which is what was called for in the onClick in your HTML. You're setting up a variable, and you're saying that X is going to equal whatever is in my form in the F name. You want the value of that from your document. Then it says you've got this little nice if else, except there's not even an else going on here. If X is exactly equal to nothing, because two quote marks next to each other with nothing in them means there's nothing there. So if X, which is your name, has nothing in it, then this is supposed to put up a little pop-up alert that says name must be filled out. And then it returns false back to the form. So basically, in this form, the only thing that's being asked for is the user's name. If they put nothing in the name slot, the form comes back with a pop-up, which is not the best practice, and it tells them they must put in their name. Now, why is a pop-up not the best practice? Because it annoys the user. It really, and don't you hate pop-ups? I hate pop-ups too. I would never give a pop-up to somebody if I could at all avoid it. But tells them you got to put a name in. You can find another way to tell the user to put in their name. Now, it doesn't, and it can't check that it's a real name, or that even if it's a real name, if maybe they put in Mark and their name is Josephine, it's a real name, but it's not their real name. But all that JavaScript can do is determine that they put something in that field, and it's going to call that something the first name. You can use this method to check out all your required fields in one function. You can have your first name, and then you can check the last name, and then you can check the email address, and that there's something there, and so forth. Now, all that script that I showed you, not just the script, but all the code, came from the W3 school. And then down further on their page, they say, ooh, this is so exciting because JavaScript can also be used to determine things like if the data that you entered is actually a number and whether the date field has a valid date in it. And it even goes on and talks about credit card numbers and phone numbers and email addresses, and it doesn't show you how to do any of that. So you would have to be finding that information out elsewhere. And guys, I was coding for 10 hours last night, all through the night. I didn't get hardly any sleep, working on my Preston page to turn in. And so I did not have the time to go looking for where you can find more explicit examples of the JavaScript to do these kinds of things. If you took the prereq to this course, you should have the book Programming Fundamentals in JavaScript. That will have information in it. Or, you know what? Google is your friend. Okay, the pros and cons of server-side validation. The pros are it is very secure. It works even if the client has JavaScript turned off on their machine because the script is running on the server and not on the client's machine. And the cons are that they have to fill in all the information before they get any feedback, and then that feedback they have to wait for it to be validated and come back before it says, hey, dummy, you forgot to put your name in, or, you know, however you want to phrase it. Probably not a good idea to call your client users dummy, but the other type of validation is client-side validation. And while the server side is enough to have a successful and secure form validation, it's a lot easier for the customer and gives them a better user experience if you use client-side validation. So client-side can get really, really tricky coding it. And I was actually, again, like I said, very short on time. I really apologize, but I was not able to find some good examples of it, but I can tell you what it looks like from the user's point of view because I have seen it from the user's point of view. It's things like telling you as soon as you type in a username and go to the next field, it will say, that name is taken, try again. Or that email is already in use. Are you sure you don't already have a membership on our site? Maybe you ought to go sign in. It'll tell you the strength of a password. It'll tell you whether or not the two fields for the email or the password, you know, when you have the confirmation field, they'll say, those don't match. And, you know, things like that. Very helpful. It is obviously going to be trickier to code, even though it's just still JavaScript. But it's a lot easier for the user because they don't have to wait for feedback until they've completely filled out the form and clicked enter and waited for it to come back to find out they've made a mistake. Also, they can fix the form before submitting it so they don't have to refill the form out. Don't you hate it when that happens? You get it all done and then it comes back and says, you forgot this stuff, and then but all the rest of your data is gone. I hate that. On the pro side of client-side validation, the form never gets submitted if the validation fails. So that saves a lot of time and server bandwidth, which saves you money. But on the con side, if the user has turned off JavaScript, and a lot of people do, it can completely bypass the validation process. So it's best if you have both client and server side validation set up. Help them get the form filled out right, send it to your server, and check it one more time. This is the URL of the article that is my primary source for this presentation. It was really fascinating reading. Excuse me. And I highly recommend it. And this is both of my sources, so I can't be yelled at for, plagiarizing or anything. Excuse me. And that's the end of my presentation. I hope that I was helpful, and have a really great day.